If there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that humans will believe almost anything. On Blasphemy with Chris and Marnee, we take a look at some of these beliefs, uncover their very human origins, how they've developed and changed over time, and the very real consequences they had in society and culture. Impacts that continue even today in our lives. Welcome to Blasphemy. My name is Chris Setty, and sitting with me today is this exquisite creature here. Her name is Marnee. How you doing?
Hey, good.
So, today's going to be kind of a different episode. Today happens to be a special day for Marnee and I because, actually, what time is it right now? I don't even know.
It is 7:53.
7:53. So, about an hour ago, 30 years ago, on January 25th, 1991, God, Marnee and I got married.
Yeah, the ceremony is probably ending about now.
It's probably about now. Crazy times. But I thought, I read all these things about like how to podcast, and they're like, they need to get to know you. I'm like, fine. So tonight I thought we'd do a special episode. It's still a story of belief. It's still a story of how that belief changed and the impacts that belief had. It just happens to be centered around two particular people, and that's myself and Marnee. And so I'm calling this one the Blasphemous Ballad of Chris and Marnee. And at first I thought, let's just sit down and talk. But then I thought, no, what would be a better anniversary gift to you is if I wrote some of it out so you could like incessantly correct me on all the details. That's so much better gift to you. And I didn't write out the whole thing. So what we're gonna do is take you kind of through our history.
Yeah.
And we'll get to a point where we'll just take it from there. We'll riff from there. And so here we go. We'll tell the Blasphemous Ballad of Chris and Marnee. Okay. So the roots of the Blasphemy podcast actually go way, way back. It all started in April of 1971 when two couples met for the first time, and they each had a baby. Here we go.
The corrections begin.
They each had a baby, a little girl and a little boy. The little girl was 3 months old at the time, and her name was Marnee. The little boy, a more mature and eminently wiser 9-monther, was named Chris. There are no real records of this meeting, but something magical must have happened. The two would grow, their lives crossing paths and intermingling in various ways.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Every week they would see each other at church, and Chris's mom even ran a daycare for a stretch of time, a daycare that Marnee actually attended. It's so weird. We have pictures of us like as little kids, like sitting in the backyard eating like bologna sandwiches or whatever our mothers fed us in the 70s.
Yes.
In 1978, Marnee's parents split up, leading to Marnee dividing her time between different towns, different homes, and she no longer showed up at the church anymore. So Marnee and I actually, our roots are in this church that we had kind of a weird experience in a way. We kind of had this community of people that we grew up our whole lives with.
Yeah.
Like there were kids that I was in the nursery with, and then I was in elementary school with, and then I was in high school with, and so that was where Marnee and I, our kind of connection point was church.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a weird church or anything like that. We weren't like handling snakes or anything.
It was basic.
It was so basic. It was perfectly basic.
It was perfectly basic.
There were big events and sleepovers at friends' houses that had her show up, but to a large degree, they lived two totally different lives. Aw. Marnee did have like "I love Chris" written on her peachy folder in like seventh grade. Chris was 13 and clueless. But,
he had no idea. It was at that age where you're like, "Don't tell him."
Ooh, I was a squirrely 13-year-old.
Don't tell him I like him. Shh.
They continued to grow up, eventually finding themselves really fun teenagers. We were. We were fun. And we were teenagers in the 80s when that's the only time it mattered to be a teenager. Every other time, whatever. Marnee would still sporadically show up at the church that had been their connection point. One such meeting occurred during a winter camp in February of 1988. The crowd of kids dispersed off to sled or ski or finger each other or other of number of church camp activities. Come on, let's be real. Church camp was Babylon to a large degree. Eventually, Chris was standing there looking at the only person who stayed behind. It was Marnee. Do you remember this? I can so distinctly remember standing in this parking lot. Remember, like, we're at camp.
No, I know. I just, like, people don't know what you're saying. Stayed behind.
Well, yeah, so we're at camp, and all of our friends are there and stuff, and we're all in this big group, and they all start dispersing off to do whatever.
Yeah, there was different activities. We're sledding, blah, 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 and we didn't
Neither one of us wanted to do any of that shit.
Activities for some reason.
So we end up, and the snow's falling. It's very romantic for two 17-year-olds. But the snow was, like, falling, and I'm standing there looking at Marnee. I'm like, oh, shit. He asked her if she wanted to go for a walk, to which she agrees, and they spent the rest of the afternoon talking as they made their way through knee-deep snow. Chris did not want this walk to ever end. Dude, I so remember this. I remember the whole time walking like, oh my God, I'm walking with Marnee fucking Irvin through the snow, and no one is here. It was pretty fucking awesome. Do you remember it? You remember?
Oh, yeah. No, I totally do. Yeah. I don't remember what our conversation was.
I think we were just chatting.
I just remember climbing around mountains and rocks, felt like trees, like in a forest.
I remember like helping you over like a barbed wire fence. Yeah. Just two little teenagers out in the snow. On the bus ride home, Chris overhears her friends discussing how Marnee had made a commitment to stop having sex with her boyfriend. Chris remembered,
no,
right.
You did not.
I totally did.
I don't think so. No.
What do you mean you don't think so?
Because that was like totally internal. I wouldn't have said it to my friends at that point. I didn't even tell them that I was having sex. The friends at church.
I heard on the bus that they were like, oh, Marnee made a commitment last night. Okay, you can say that, but they totally said it.
No.
You don't believe me?
No. It didn't happen then.
Okay.
I went home. I didn't tell anybody. I went home and told my boyfriend that I didn't want to have sex anymore, but I hadn't made some commitment to God. That was at summer camp. You're mixing up stories.
This is why I wanted to say it like this, so that you could do this.
Well, don't argue with me when I correct you.
Chris wouldn't see Marnee for over a year. Marnee's commitment to Jesus led to her becoming pregnant a month after returning from camp. That's true, right?
No, I had not made a commitment to Jesus. Let me tell this part.
Okay, you tell us part.
What happened was we went for that walk, and I was in a bad relationship. My boyfriend was cheating on me at the time. I was having sex. I was feeling, I was taught I wasn't supposed to be doing that, so I was having guilt about it, unfortunately. I mean, it was unfortunate the way he treated me, and I would have never let him treat me that way if I hadn't been trained in that. You shouldn't have sex and you should get married if you do. So like I stayed with him. So I was in this miserable place.
Right. At 17.
At 17
years old.
Yeah.
Right.
And I went for a walk with you and we talked and we had such a good time. And I came away from that inside myself thinking, I want someone like that has the same kind of origins of perspective as I do. I didn't have those right words, but it was just like I want someone who believes and sees the world more like I do, like you.
Yeah.
But I was still super tied psychologically to this guy because I had been programmed that I had to stay with him. So I was going to try to correct that relationship rather than leave it and go to find something better. So I went home literally that Sunday we got home, and I called him that night and said I didn't want to have sex anymore. And he was like, fine, that's fine. And then like proceeded to circle around the conversation to break up with me for some other reason. And I was like, no. And then just I subconsciously knew that he had broken up with me because I'd said I didn't want to have sex, even though he had denied that. So I continued to have sex with him, and at the end of the month, I was pregnant.
Yeah, yeah. Your senior year of high.
It was my junior.
Your
and
junior,
it was
you
the
got
last
pregnant, right? Okay.
The last what's that called? Quarter. of my junior year.
Well, you wanted something like me, and it turns out you got the fucking exact thing, for good or bad. So, the next time Chris encountered the subject of Marnee was during a phone call from his college dorm. It was January 1989, and his mom informed him that Marnee had given birth to a little girl. She went on to gush about how this was her favorite baby of all time, which 18-year-old Chris took as an insult from his mother. I'm like, really? But I remember this phone call on a payphone because it was fucking 1989. And I remember her telling me, do you remember Marnee? I'm like, of course I remember Marnee. And she said she had a baby. And I was just like, oh, holy shit. I remember after that phone call, just not being able to stop thinking about you, going like, wow, that's a lot. You know, like I'm fucking around. Freshman year of college was playtime. I can so remember this phone call and hanging up just going like, holy shit. 4 months later, Chris returns from his failure of a freshman year in college. It was. He had been gone, made some amazing friends, had a blast, but now he's home and wanting to reconnect with old friends. Church was where this happened throughout his life, and so the next Sunday he shows up, excited to see people he hadn't seen for a long time. Okay, so I want you to tell this part of the story, actually.
Yeah.
Do you remember this? So, my mom ran the nursery at church, which was kind of this door that faced kind of the main area that everyone walked through. And I remember I was leaning against the wall talking to her.
Yeah.
And then I hear a voice that I recognized, a friend that was an old friend that I'd known forever, say, "Hey, Chris." And I turned around and I said, "Hey," her name, and then turned back around. And I thought she was walking with some friend she brought from high school or some shit like that.
So I had just gotten back from visiting my mom in Alaska. And I was there for 2 weeks, and I had cut my hair in this short bob. Back then, it was like the braid was this like A-line bob, which is still popular, but it was definitely not as modernized as it is now.
It's so funny that I know what you're talking about. Most people are like, what? A bob?
A-line? It was short in the back, graduating to longer in the front.
Every bob I know looks like an idiot.
And I bleached it out blonde. I had naturally blonde hair, but I had bleached it out platinum. And I had gotten this cool like silver dress. I remember things by the way I look because I'm very aesthetically driven, and I'm
the fashion.
Yeah. So I had gotten this cool new dress in Alaska, which was a strange place to think that you got an awesome like silver dress, but it was this like pewter silver. It was really cool. I'm laughing at him.
I don't remember what the fuck I was wearing.
No, I can picture the dress. My memory is so tied to fashion. And so I was walking with Shanda, our friend, our childhood friend.
Uh-huh.
We were late. So church had already started. You were standing there at the nursery window talking to your mom, and we were walking through the breezeway and then past the nursery and towards the sanctuary. And Shanda said, "Hi, Chris." And I turned and said, "Hi, Chris." And you said, "Hey, Shanda." And then when I said, "Hi, Chris," you glanced around, like looking past me over. There's no one else there but her and I, like nobody around. But he like looks over around, like looking for some other voice that this came from. And I said, "Hi, Chris." And he finally looked at me and was like, "Oh, hi, Marnee." And we continued to walk. I mean, we didn't really even stop walking. We just were walking past him saying that. And went in and sat down. And like a few minutes later, he comes in and tucks right next to me.
Yes, I did. I was like, I'm getting in there. I just remember thinking like, holy shit, that's Marnee. Oh my God. That night, Chris worked up the courage to call her dad's house to try to get a hold of her to ask her out. Marnie's dad was scary back then, and Chris was desperately hoping he did not answer the phone, forcing Chris to explain that he was calling to ask out your Christian teen daughter who got pregnant. I remember this like dialing and going, fuck. And then, of course, one ring and your goddamn dad fucking answered the phone. He's like, "Hello." I'm like, "Shit." And I'm like, "Hey, this is Chris from church, whatever." And he's like, "I know who you are, Chris." I'm like, "Oh, my God, okay." I'm like, "Is Marnee there?" He's like, "She doesn't live here." I'm like, "Fuck." But I did end up getting your number.
Yeah.
And then I called and I asked Marnee out.
Mm-hmm. For that Friday.
Yes, for that Friday.
To the movies that Friday.
Yeah.
So I said yes.
Yes. So when Friday finally arrived, Chris picks up Marnee. And being the incredibly charming fellow Chris is, he begins talking. Marnee will find out in the years that followed, this is what Chris does. He talks all the time. At one point, Chris asked the very safe question, so what did you do this week? Her response was a highly unsafe, do you really want to know? I'm very frozen like, oh shit. Chris now really did want to know, so she proceeds to relate that earlier in the week, she was informed that if she did not...
Wait. You've skipped over. You haven't even told them what happened to the baby.
I know, but I'm getting there. We're going to talk about that in retrospect, so calm down. I'm trying to build a story here.
All right.
Sometimes we got to go back and forth and like make it interesting.
Let's see how you're going to do this.
Okay. Okay, where the fuck was I? See what? Oh, here we go. She proceeds to relate that earlier in the week, she was informed that if she did not revoke the adoption of her little girl and go get her from her new family, the biological father was going to likely get full custody of her. So Marnee had actually, I knew this at the time when I asked her out. Obviously knew she had a baby. My mom told me. But then I also had been informed, through my mom probably, that Marnee had given up this little baby for adoption. And that you went to Alaska right after that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to kind of like decompress and, be taken care of by your mom and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I'm in the car with her. So how was your week? Just like two teenagers. I was 8. We were both 18. And she's like, you really want to know? And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, now, I definitely do. She proceeds to tell me that, well, I adopted this baby out and then I had to go get it. I had to go stand in this house and this family who had renamed her and like welcomed her and had parties to. Marnee had to like as an 18-year-old girl stand there and watch as they packed all her shit up so that she could drive away. It was such a nuts thing for me to hear sitting in the car. And I think in that moment I went, this girl is different. Because you're sitting in the car with me going to the movies. I'm like, what? What did you do this week?
I'm such an avoidant that back then when I was going through that insanity, it was so matter of fact. I'm like, yep, this is what's happening in my life. When you talk about it now, I cry.
Yeah.
Because I can feel it now. I'm distanced enough away from it without it overwhelming me. But, jeez, I feel for that 18-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Whew.
18. So Chris, trying to break the nervous tension with humor, responded by saying, my mom cleaned my room yesterday. That's the first thing I think to say is like, say something funny. Turns out Marnee will also find out this is also what Chris does. Chris was struck right there with a very powerful realization. There is something about Marnee that is different in the most amazing ways. And he was not fit to be included in this situation. They sat in the theater as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade played. That's how old we are. That was in the theaters. At one point, Chris felt Marnie's head come to rest on his shoulder. Tilting his eyes to see what's up, not wanting to do anything to stir her from this position, I'm like, don't move. He sees she's sound asleep. Of course she fucking is.
Tired. I had such a week. Fall asleep in Indiana Jones.
Yes.
On our first date.
I put at this point, Chris wanted even that movie to go on forever. Like, this sucks, but I don't care. Just keep riding your horse, Indiana Jones. On the way home, they stop for frozen yogurt, and Chris is panicking. He's chastising himself for being head over heels in love with someone he sat next to twice. And knowing that there is a baby involved, he is certain he is not the right ingredient for this family, since he wasn't sure if he could even take care of himself. He very awkwardly tells Marnee that he wasn't looking for a girlfriend.
Yeah,
remember that?
We're just like chatting, you know, you want
I'm
to
just
date.
Like, do something quick so
and
that...
I don't remember what was around it. I just that stood out as him saying like, I don't want a girlfriend or anything.
Oh no, I was
mental
panicking.
Note. I took it as a mental note, like, okay.
I felt so drawn to you, like more than I'd ever felt, and I'm like, but come, there's a living human involved in this, that doesn't have a choice in this matter, and you're not gonna be the right thing for this. So I'm trying to like push Marnee off, kind of like, hey, trying to, whatever.
Be cool.
Yeah, I was trying to be cool. Obviously, it worked. He figured he better push her away while he is only totally in love with her rather than later when who knows what damage could be done. He dropped her off and drove her home, trying to talk himself out of being totally captivated by Marnee, not sure how he was going to do it. The next day, he called Marnee and asked if she wanted to hang out. That should
back up, because I've heard what you got home that night and talked to your mom.
I did, and this is a funny thing because this was the battle that was going on. Was like these two things were happening to me. One was I'm like, this girl, I got to be with this girl, and at the same time, I'm like stepping back and going like, if someone described this situation to you and you were the person they were saying was entering the scene, it would be a fucking sitcom, that everything went wrong. And so it was like this battle in my mind. But I did go home and I walk in. It was late. And I walk in and I remember I was leaning against the fucking dishwasher or something in our kitchen. My mom comes down the hall, gets out of bed and hears me come home. And she's like, so how was it? And I'm like, I'm going to marry her. And she laughed, which was the appropriate response. Laughter. And even I laughed to myself like, I know that's ludicrous, but I was just saying like, I'm so into this girl. But at the same time, I also
it shows you the conflict and how things went, because he's telling me, I don't want a girlfriend, but he goes home and tells his mom, I'm going to marry her.
Yeah, there was extreme things happening here. I was a confused teenage boy. And I remember like laying in bed that night going like, okay, Chris, you need to be careful here. And this is not a situation like any other. It's not like just, oh, this is a girl, just get to know her. It was like there was other things involved. And I remember thinking like, okay, you need to figure this out. And then the next day, the first thing I did was call you and be like, you want to hang out? So where was I? Oh, the next day, he called Marnee and asked if she wanted to hang out. That should help the situation. And then the next, and the next, and the next. Soon, Chris and Marnee were the best of friends, spending almost every day together, just doing life, showing each other parts of their lives they had spent apart, and loving every single second of it. Do you remember that? We had so much fucking fun. Oh, my God.
I don't know, just did things. I don't remember what we did.
I would just drive to Marnie's house, pick her up, and we would go and do stuff. Took you to San Diego one time.
Yeah, no, I remember those trips. Like we went to the San Diego for the day, and then another day we went to Santa Barbara for the day.
We did. And then you like took me past the houses you lived in, and we were just like, hey, we're just buddies. It was fucking pretty awesome. I mean, I was like madly in love with her, but it was like I had to keep it cool because again, I was afraid.
And then was I was in beauty school at that
You
time?
were. Yeah, you were.
Yes, I was. In the Valley. That was when I was going to the one in the Topanga Plaza.
Yeah. For our LA listeners. Topanga Plaza Mall used to have a cosmetology school in it, and Marnee went in there. Chris never made any moves or tried to progress anything beyond friendship. He was hopelessly and desperately in love with Marnee, but there was still the matter of a little girl who didn't deserve a life that has some idiot teenager fucking things up.
I remember that was at the point, like, when we were hanging out. I think I remember us hanging out. We had Shreya with us, and I had worked at the Nordstrom's in the Topanga Plaza as well.
That's right.
And I wanted to show my old coworker. I didn't work there anymore, but I wanted to take her there and show them. And so we went to the Topanga Plaza with Shreya in the stroller, and I went to Nordstrom's and was showing her to my coworkers. And so she's in the stroller, and we're all looking down at her, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, she's so cute." And one of them said, "She looks just like you." And I wasn't looking at her when she said it. I was looking down at Shreya, and I was like, "I know," because she looked just like me. But when I looked up as I was saying, "I know," I looked up and she was looking at Chris. And I was mortified because I'm like, oh, fuck, that's not. No.
I'm like, well, that's weird because
awkward because we're not dating and that's not his baby. And we're just hanging out. He doesn't want a girlfriend.
Yes.
So I was like, ugh.
And our daughter is Latina. She's half Mexican. Neither one of us are Mexican. So like,
but you have.
I was.
Cherokee, so you
I'm
look,
dark,
and it was
yes,
summertime, so you probably look tan.
Yeah. After a while, they started hanging out less and less, and eventually they went back to living separate lives. Remember that? I remember that going on. Chris's feelings hadn't changed, but Marnee had moved on, dating other guys. Fuck those guys.
Well, I actually heard rumors that you had a crush on the French exchange student that was at the church at the time. So we were just kind of like wandering off, and I was actually going through like concern that I should be a family with her father, and so I had tried to get back with him, and that was a mess. So that didn't last. So then, but he was then taking me to court, and it was a lot of crap going on.
Again, social moralism failed you.
Yeah.
And then came a fateful week in August of that year. This was 1989. Chris, I just turned 19, like 3 weeks earlier. Chris's mom busts into his room and tells him that he needs to get up.
No. Oh.
See, you're correcting me when this is my story and this happened to me. You weren't even here.
I'm trying to. Oh, yeah.
It is.
Let's see.
Marnee was going to be a counselor at a summer camp.
That's right.
That's
right.
This happened to me. You can't correct me on this. You weren't even here. You were off doing something we'll talk about soon. But yeah, so my mom like busted in my room and was like, Chris, you have to get up right now. And it wasn't even noon yet, right? And I'm like, what? No. And she's like, no, Chris, I promised that I would watch Marnie's baby this week while she's at camp, while her stepmom rather, was at work.
And I was at camp being a counselor.
Yeah, Marnee was going to be gone for the week, and Marnie's stepmom was going to be dropping off Marnie's daughter, who I really hadn't hung out with. I really had zero contact with her. Just a couple times.
We usually left them with the parents.
Yeah,
so
and I didn't know what to do.
A lot of time with her.
My mom tells me, no, I got called into work, though, and you got to do it. And I remember going like, Mom, that's not even legal. Like, that's no way. That you can't do that, you know. And she's like, I'm dead serious, right? So it turns out she wasn't pranking him, and soon Chris is pacing the entryway tile, talking himself down from an impending panic attack. He figures that once this little human's grandma sees that it is just him and there are no actual adults in the house, she'll take this fragile little life form to a better, safer option. He snapped back to reality by the doorbell, opening the door, confident this will be over soon. As the door opened, Marnie's stepmom started hauling in a truckload of baby shit, complete with a real, live, breathing baby, sitting in a car seat on the floor, staring up at him with a look that said she was thinking the same thing as Chris. Oh, shit.
No.
And then the door closed as Grandma peeled out of the driveway. It was like...
No, she wouldn't have thought, oh, shit. She would have just been like, hey, hi.
No, yeah, I know. I was thinking, oh, shit. And I'm just thinking, like, stay a while. And she's bailed, you know, like... It was pretty stressful at first.
No, I'm saying Shreya.
No, Shreya was fine.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm sure she was fine. It was pretty stressful at first. Chris decided the car seat was the safest place for her, so he carried her around in that for about an hour, like in the backyard and like everywhere. Before the little human showed she could communicate very loudly to get her point across. He spent the rest of the day crawling around the carpet with her, always one step ahead, scanning the environment for dangers and clearing the path. I put her down, and she could fucking crawl like a million miles an hour.
She would have been like 7 months.
She was 7 months old, and she was tiny thing, but she
Yeah.
was incredibly physically advanced. Like, she always just did things really fast. And so I remember putting her down thinking, oh, she'll just sit there, you know, and then bam, she's down the hall. I'm like, fuck, I don't know what's on the floor, you know? So I'm like on the carpet, my eyes like at the level of the carpet and like looking for fuzz or any plastic, whatever fucking she could like choke on. I'm like, this thing is going to live. Every day found Chris more at ease, and Shreya, the little girl, more excited to see him. Chris would make her laugh even when she was crying, giggling as tears poured off her cheeks. I remember she'd like cry, and I could make her laugh, and then, you know, it was fun. He learned what she liked to eat and was appalled at what we feed babies these days. Oh, God. I'm like, this is what she's eating? I taste it. It's fucking horrible. But I fed her, learned how to do that. I was like 19. It's pretty good. By Friday night, Chris found himself looking forward to seeing Shreya the next day, but then remembered, damn, she's not coming tomorrow. I can so distinctly going like, oh, I'll see Shreya again tomorrow. And then I'm like, oh, fuck. She's not going to be there. And then his next thought was, fuck, now I'm in love with both of them. I remember thinking like, well, this is not going the right direction. Sometime later, Chris would be excited knowing that the counselors from the camp were having a party at his house. I remember they're saying like, they're going to have an after camp party at my house. I'm like, oh, hell yeah. Because now I'm like, I'm totally comfortable with your baby. Let's do this. He was less excited when Marnee didn't show up, and even less so when some other girl explained to him that she actually was on a date with some Canadian fucker she met during camp. Canadian, a foreigner. Nice. As the fall approached, Chris decided to help out with the youth at the church because, 19 years old, you're ready to mentor youth. You've been out of high school a year. Before they kicked everything off for the school season, there was a meeting for all of the adult helpers. Chris arrived early and was standing in the parking lot when he spotted someone walking from the far end toward where he was standing. Her hair was purple now, but he immediately realized it was Marnee. His mind went to war about what to do. Be cool and stand there and wait for her, or be weird and start walking towards her. He got weird with it. I remember going like, should I go stay? I should probably stay.
You called out.
Of course I did.
You were like, hey, Marnee, is that you?
Yep. Throughout the evening, the two were never really apart, and Chris felt amazing. He had always been in love with her, and now the baby sitch didn't seem as scary after keeping her alive for 1 week between the hours of 9 and 5.
When I saw
I was
you
a pro.
In the parking lot, walking across the parking lot, we were the first ones there.
Yeah.
Again, there was like two. It's like two events where we're alone in the church parking lot.
Interesting.
These meetings where we're like, oh wow, you. But when I saw you, it had been like a month since I'd seen you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was like, had this feeling like, oh, I really like him. Like, I didn't realize until I saw you that day. I was like, oh, we haven't been hanging out. I hadn't seen you. And now that I've seen you again, I was like, oh, I like him.
Yeah. Who wouldn't? The two started hanging out again, but Chris was still cautious. He had to talk himself into considering himself ready for such a thing. Nobody in their right mind, especially Marnee, that's what I thought, was going to judge him as the right choice for her. And so he was still cautious and also happy to be around her again. I remember going like, okay, I still don't know if this is going to be successful, me being a part of this, but at least I'm around her.
And he's holding
again.
back. You're holding back. And I'm also holding back because I'm thinking, I've got a situation. I got a baby. And that's a lot. I'm not chasing.
It was a situation. We can be honest. It was a cinch.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not chasing anybody down. I'm not going after a guy when I have a baby. Like, if anybody likes me enough to take this whole story on, they're going to have to make the moves.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, I liked you, but I was like, going to keep that to myself.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking, like, I'm not going to tell someone that I'm going to take care of you and be there for you and then fuck that up, or something, when, again, at 19, I was just like, I didn't know what the fuck I was going to do. I mean, I think I was bagging groceries at a Safeway or some crazy shit.
There was, Bonds. I think you were at Bonds.
Bonds, whatever. It was a couple months later, after some encouragement from mutual friends, that Chris finally asked Marnee out on a real date. She said yes, and that night they kissed. It was October 23rd, 1989. Still the 80s.
We've been together ever since.
That's right.
But yeah, between that time of seeing you in those couple months, we started hanging out again. Like,
we did. We hung out all the time. Every day.
And then finally you were like, let's go on a real date.
Yep, every day. So now it was Chris, Marnee, and Shreya together pretty much all the time. They often would get strange looks and whispered comments as people tried to figure out, is that their little sister? I'd hear that all the time. Is that his little sister? Please tell me that's his little sister or whatever. Yeah. It was funny. We looked very young, and then we were carting around this baby, and people were like, what the fuck's happening?
At 18, I looked like 12.
No, people, I remember fucking being like 20 and people asking me, like, is your wife like 16? I'm like, fuck off. She's 6 months younger than me, asshole. Like, what are you saying?
I had just like the babyest baby face. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. We looked young. I was like a skinny little young guy. Oh, man. One day, as Chris walked around the mall, Shreya wiggling on his shoulders as he pretended to trip and almost drop her into every water feature or family they passed. I would always do that. Like a big family, I'll be like, whoops, and like act like I was going to throw Shreya into them, and then she would crack up. It was great. This is when you're 19. You do this kind of stuff. She reached down, grabbing both sides of his face as she leaned over, her upside-down eyes looking directly into his, and said, I love you, Daddy. Oh, my God, I remember this. I was like, oh, my God. At first, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, is this appropriate? And at the same time, I'm looking around like, I will murder all you motherfuckers around here for her. You know, like, there's this like, Yeah, that was crazy. 19 again. You're like, what did you just call me? Is this okay? I want to be. Like, I was like super happy about it. But at the same time, it was kind of like, is that cool? You know, like, yeah. A few months later, Chris and Marnee were engaged with a ring my dad bought for us. 19. Just saying. 9 months after that, on January 25th, 1991 at 7 p.m., 30 years ago, right now, they were married in the very place they had met when they were still fresh in this world.
Yeah.
With the now 2-year-old Shreya performing the role of Flower Girl.
Yeah.
Crazy. We got married in the very same church that we met in.
Yeah.
Pretty weird. I mean, that was normal for a long time, but not in fucking the 80s.
It was like where you grew up in the church, and you just you sent out invitations to a family that didn't go to the church, but you just put in the bulletin, Chris and Marnie's wedding is on January 25th, 7 o'clock. Everyone come.
There was like 250 people.
Yeah, there's like 300 people.
It was so many people. Because
we grew up there. Everybody knew us.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Marnee had turned 20 a couple weeks earlier. And Chris, at 20 and a half, would obviously be a much-needed dose of maturity in the relationship.
Yeah.
Marnee came into this world a little older than 0, and I came in at like -10. So she was definitely the mature one in the relationship. Even then. That night, as they were falling asleep, Chris kissed Marnee and said, I'm glad I married you. He said it the next night, too, and the next, and all the nights from then on.
And I said it back every night.
Of course. Yeah, Marnee rejected Marnee every night from then on. Or Chris. No. Like, she said it back. Just saying.
Yeah,
we say that every night.
It's been a good thing to... It's funny we did not even intentionally start that. It wasn't like a plan. I just know that you said it that night, and I said it back, and then we said it the next night, and you said it back. And it's like, once you do it, like, I think it was like 3 times, you're like, oh, now we got to keep going.
We're doing it.
and then so like it became a thing to where then years in and you're still saying it, but like you're mad when you go to bed.
Glad I married you.
But it's glaring at you. You flounce into bed, frustrated, and you're like, but that whole ritual of I'm glad I married you. I'm glad I married you too. Is like glaring, like screaming at you that you haven't said it.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm not going to. You're like, fuck, I can't break that now. And so after all these years of doing it, just because one little stupid thing that I'm pissed off at.
Right.
So then you go, glad I married you. And then you respond,
yep.
Glad I married you.
Hey, it's a little thing.
Yes, but some nights it's really mushy. Like,
yeah. So we're 20 at this point. Just got married. Chris was an EMT, answering 911 calls and trying to shock people back to life, while Marnee was in cosmetology school still because it takes longer to be certified to cut someone's hair.
But by the time we got married, I was already in the salon. I finished
when we
before
got married?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess it was right before.
Yeah,
it
was while
married.
we were dating that I was in
that's
beauty
right.
school.
Because I was an EMT when we got married.
You were an EMT already.
That's true. So that was right before.
Quickly got into that, and then I finished right in November, December, and then we got married in January. So I was just new in the salon.
Marnee started cosmetology school, and then later I decided to become an EMT. Went to school, got hired, was answering driving. I was 19 years old.
Yeah, driving ambulance,
driving lights and sirens, going to try and save people's lives. Yeah. Marnee was still in cosmetology school. And would be in it was fucking crazy laws.
To cut hair safely.
Jamming people IVs and people and stuff. Marnie's like, no, don't fuck their hair up.
This isn't
Could be disastrous. It isn't long before the two have an announcement to their terrified families. Marnee was pregnant. It was 2 months later. In the back of Marnie's dad's van in Yosemite National Park. That's where it happened. Chris and Marnee don't really see what the big deal is about. We're like, oh, we're what? Well, they're just like, oh.
We're always like that. And it's been a lot of our, which is this whole everything will be fine has been our kind of mantra throughout the years. And it's been good and bad.
Sure.
Because not everything is not always fine.
Sure.
But a lot of times it is.
Sure.
So,
And the stuff that's not fine, it works out.
We've made it.
Yeah.
We learned.
Things work out. Soon, Chris joins the Army. Turns out their apartment was above the home of an Army recruiter who was a total fucking scumbag. That's all I'm going to say about him.
We're done. Yeah.
And so, a week after turning 21, Chris headed off to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for basic training. In fucking August. It was terrible. 12 weeks later, he was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for further training. He hated being away from Marnee and Sharia. It sucked.
It was miserable.
Sucked. I was in basic training, and again, this recruiter lived below us or whatever. I was in basic training, right? And I went to basic training in 1991, which was in this weird time period where they were trying to bring laws and stuff in to keep people from being abused when they're in Army training. But I was stuck with the dudes who were like, fuck that, that's for pussies. And so they abused you while telling you better shut your fucking mouth or whatever. So it was rough, right? They were not nice people. They weren't on our side. They kept telling us they were, but then treating us differently. And one night, I'm in bed, and I hear this fucking drill sergeant down the hall yell, Setty, fucking loud as shit. And I just froze. I'm like, fuck. You never want your name to come out of their goddamn mouth. And I'm like, oh shit. So I go down there and he's like, you have a phone call. And he's looking at me with these daggers. I'm like, what do you mean I have a phone call? And he's like, you have a phone call. You better take it. And so I take it and it's Marnee on the phone.
The fucking horrible recruiter that lived downstairs was like a scumbag of scumbags of a man.
Yeah.
And he lied to me and told me I was sad. I was crying. I was missing Chris. And he was like, well, you can talk to him. I can get his number. I'm like, you can? And he's like, yeah, I can get a hold of him. You can call him. And so I'm like, he won't get in trouble. He's like, no. He knew it was going to be bad for him to get no reason, no emergency call, just his wife crying, wanting to say, hi, I miss you. And he just thought it was funny. So I didn't realize. So I call him and Chris answers. He's like, hello. And I'm like, hey, babe, how are you? And he's like, is there anything wrong? And I'm like, no, I just miss you. I love you. And he's like, freaking out because there's
guy's
no
looking
emergency.
At me. She did not see the man that was standing in the corner, fucking staring laser beams through me.
Yeah,
it was rough.
And then I realized that I had been duped by this fucker, and Chris was now in trouble, and we hung up. He hung up really quickly, so it was really traumatizing, and I just bawled. Well, then he went on to his.
I hung up the phone, and the drill sergeant looked at me, and he's like, "You know what to do." And then I started doing push-ups, and did push-ups till dawn until he said, "Go to breakfast." Yeah, but whatever. I was 21. I was young.
Yeah,
and
you
able
can handle
to do
it.
That. By the beginning of 1991, the family was reunited with orders to report to Fort Ord in Monterey, California. We actually joined the Army thinking this will get us out of California because we were struggling financially,
and
obviously.
we wanted to leave California because we were tired of the sunshine. We wanted 4 seasons. And
yeah, we
had
all these romantic ideas
Let's
about
see the country or the world. Send us somewhere. And they sent us to Monterey. 5 hours away from home.
4 hours north. Assholes. They struggled to survive, made some friends, and on March 8th of 1992, added little Taylor to the starving brood. His birth story is epic.
Oh,
Though Marnee, I'm telling this story.
No,
we're telling this story.
People get bored with birth stories.
No, we're telling this one. This is the best story that's ever happened to me. Though Marnee had been through giving birth before, this was the first time doing it by herself with no one to help but her child husband. I had never been through this, and I'm thinking
doing it by myself. Oh, you mean I had other family? I had parents.
Yeah,
Marnee had, and I had
a friend's mom that helped you out.
Yeah, so it was just me and you. We were by ourselves.
It was by ourselves, and you were. I was the fucking naive idiot.
Yes,
I didn't know shit.
No,
and so. As Marnee goes into labor, the two head off to the hospital way too early, and a lot of time goes by before even getting into a room. The nurse keeps coming in to check on Marnie's progress, always walking out, saying over her shoulder.
No, wait, into a room. What do you mean? No. I'm not saying what do you mean. I'm saying this is what's going on in the military. Back 32 years ago when Sharia was born. Birthing rooms were new in civilian hospitals. So I had Sharia. I labored and delivered in one room. They tried to make them look more homey and be all comfortable.
Sure.
So, but that was a new concept in 32 years ago when she was born. So in the military, it wasn't even a concept. There was no birthing room in the military hospital. There was a labor room and a delivery room.
Yeah.
And you labored in this tiny cubicle of a room. And then when it was time to push, they wheeled your bed out through the hall, down the hall to the delivery room. And it was like this operating sterile hospital room.
Well, it was crazy too. It was the hallway that at the end of it is where the couch that you were sitting to wait. I remember sitting there with you and watching these people wheel women.
Yeah, no, I remember looking down the end of the hall and seeing people on the couch while I'm like pushing. It was weird.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, so they kept coming into the labor room.
Yeah.
We were in the little labor room.
That's what I mean. We were in like because remember we walked around for a long time.
No, we walked. That was, we didn't walk. I don't think we walked in that one. I think that was Hunter.
Oh, okay, maybe. So anyway, we're in this room, whatever. This room. So the nurse keeps coming in to check on Marnee, and she kept saying, like, oh, she's checking her. It won't be long now.
Yeah, she kept saying as soon as the doctor gets done, he'll come in here and he'll break your water, and it'll get you going.
Right.
And it'll just make it go.
What it sounded like was there was kind of an intense situation going on with the woman that was delivering or something. I remember there being something like there was a reason he was delayed.
Yeah, no, he was. It was because he was with another, doing another delivery.
Right. So at one point, and seriously, this nurse came in like, I don't know how many times and did the same thing. And so we're just like, oh, what the fuck? So at one point, Marnee lets Chris know that shit is going down and everyone needs to get on board now. The train is leaving the station. So Chris runs off to get the nurse, who proceeds to come in and do another check. And she's still super nonchalant. Remember, she's like, okay, let's check. She goes to check Marnee, and the amniotic sac is actually coming out of Marnee intact. Like, it's protruding to where it's...
No, not yet.
Yes, it is. That's why they wheeled us over.
No, they wheeled us over because I was dilated. She was like, oh, you're at 10. You're ready to go.
Well, we went over there. It was, because I fucking saw it.
Yeah, once I was pushing, but in the labor room.
You weren't pushing yet.
No, listen. The amniotic sac was when I was pushing.
I love how we're arguing about your amniotic sac.
I know.
That's great. Tell me more.
It wasn't there yet.
Whatever. That's such a minor detailed argument. Okay. It wasn't coming out of her, but it also wasn't breaking. And she was at the point where her body was going to have a baby.
And it was ready. And she was like, oh, it's time for you to go. You're right.
Right.
And I was like, I know.
Right. And this turned out to be a thing that we would find out that this just didn't really happen with Marnee. And it usually had, but this at this point, we're like, okay. And so I remember her checking and her face totally changed. She's like, we got to do something now. And next thing you know, we're like fucking wheeling Marnee into, and this is the Army, so it's like you have to imagine this like seafoam green, concrete, and stainless steel.
Yes, that's what I remember.
Imagine government scientists running around doing an alien autopsy. That's what it felt like. It's not like this modern hospital where there's a fucking lounge chair in the corner, a couch, and soft music playing. It's like you're out in. Everyone can see. There was no dividers. I just remember it was a big room with multiple places you could have babies, kind of thing. It was pretty wild. But we were the only ones in there at that time. So the next thing you know, they're wheeled into the delivery area where the doctor was waiting. In a calm and soothing voice, he lets them know that he is simply going to break the amniotic sac, and then things are going to move forward quickly. I remember him saying, look at me and going like, just simply going to rupture this thing, and everything's just going to progress from there. It's going to you'll see. Everything's going to be great. I remember like, okay, because he could see I was a little worried, like, this doesn't seem normal. I delivered babies as an EMT, actually, several. And this was not the scenario that, this was like, get them to the hospital if this was happening, like in the field or whatever.
But the sac was not broken.
Yeah, that's a complication, right? And
okay.
It's not, but it is, right? It's not a normal thing, and so it, whatever. I was like, oh shit. Now where was I? Oh, he picks up an instrument that looked like a crochet hook, bending down in order to carefully puncture the bag. Just then, Marnee's hit with an intense contraction and bears down hard to meet it. As the hook penetrated the membrane, it was fully pressurized by every muscle in Marnee's body. Oh my God, this is the best. Pop. The bag exploded amniotic fluid directly into the doctor's face. Like he was, I can't even tell you how close he was to this. Leaving a cartoon-like void on the wall behind him. I remember looking at the wall, and it's like running down the wall, and there's like a man kind of like dude-shaped, like bent over dude-shaped void. It was great.
And I remember going,
Marnee's little voice immediately eked out, sorry. And everyone in the room
like,
cracks
no.
up.
They said you don't have to apologize.
They're like, you don't have to apologize. And the doctor was such a boss. He like wipes it off his face. There is like pieces of stuff that's dripping.
And
he wipes it off. He's like, was that fluid clear? Did anyone get a look at that?
Yeah.
Was that clear fluid? I was like fucking laughing my ass off.
And then he said, I should have the nurse do that next time.
Yeah, that's what I said. I should. And understand, we're 21 years old. Yeah. We're children, and this is sport.
Oh my gosh!
Once Taylor, his name was Taylor, by the way, the little boy that'd be born that day. And once Taylor was out, he's 28 now. We moved on into another area where they weighed and wrapped him up. Chris was holding Marnee.
No, it was right there.
No, it was like we went over.
Oh,
there was like a little side room where
the
sink and the scale was and shit. See, I'll correct you on these details. I remember this story so vividly. So once Taylor's out, we moved into another area where they weighed and wrapped him up. Chris was holding Marnee, his face right up against hers as they soaked in the happiness.
Oh, because I was holding the baby.
No, you weren't.
I wasn't. You were just hugging me.
I was hugging you going, you did so great. We're doing that whole post like we did it kind of thing, right? And I remember my face was right next to yours because I remember we were really, really close. From behind Chris, the nurse said, hey, Dad, do you want to cut the cord? Chris and Marnee both made confused faces at each other as they said in unison, the doctor's her dad? Chris turned around to find two medical professionals with very concerned looks on their faces, trying to make the decision if they should let these two take this baby home with them.
When we realized they were saying,
we're like,
talking to you.
Oh, I'm the dad.
You're the dad.
I'm the dad.
And
they're like,
oh,
are you? Oh, this is our second. Don't worry. They're like, oh, shit.
That's hilarious.
Crazy. In July of 1993, Fort Ord was closing. The unit was being deactivated, and Chris and Marnee headed off to their new assignment, Fort Riley, Kansas. We had a choice. We could go to, like, New York, right? Really far.
New York or Fort Lewis, Washington. Tacoma.
No, that wasn't a choice. Remember, they were so originally they were going to move our unit from Fort Ord to Fort Lewis.
It was Kansas, New York.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy.
The third, there was three. I thought.
What's so crazy is we were going to get on a bus to come look for housing in Tacoma, Washington. We live in Spokane now, on the other side of the state, but still in Washington. And at the last minute, like literally days before we were supposed to go do this, they said, you know what? We're going to close down the whole unit. Everyone's getting reassigned. And they said, look, you can ask where you want to go, but everyone's getting sent to Fort Drum, New York, or Fort Riley, Kansas. So take your pick.
Yeah.
And I put Fort Riley, Kansas, thinking, no one will ask for that. And sure enough, they fucking gave it to us because who's asking for Kansas? So what's funny? So I remember we like pack all our shit up. We got 2 kids now.
Yeah.
We have a dog.
And a dog.
And we're driving from L.A. to fucking Kansas, halfway across the...
Because we went home to say goodbye to her. And the Army packed our stuff. The Army was taking our stuff.
The Army took our stuff. But my folks and Marnie's parents lived in Los Angeles area still. And so... and we had, so I want you though to tell. So like we're driving. This is before Google Maps and shit. We're like reading maps. Okay, we're like we're having to navigate.
We left the dog.
Oh, that's right. He stayed back.
He stayed back until because we didn't know where we were going to be. We didn't know where we were landing.
That's right.
We literally had the Army had given us like 3 days of lodging.
Yeah.
Like money for lodging in a hotel, and we had to find a place. We had to get to Kansas and find a place to live because they didn't have housing on post.
Right.
So
the story I want you to tell though is as we're driving to Kansas, we're driving through Colorado and we get to the border of Kansas.
Oh,
and Marnie's whole fear as we're heading into Kansas. You tell the story.
Okay. No, as we're prepping, because the Army was like prepped you for your new duty station, and they sent you this package of like the area and aspects of it, and so it had all this stuff about the weather, and it was talking about tornadoes, and it was terrifying. I'm reading all this stuff about what you have to do to prepare for tornadoes, and I'm like, who the hell lives in this? What? This is terrifying. And so we're driving, and it's like our second day, whatever, third day, I don't remember how long it took us, and we get across the border in Colorado. We stop for dinner in Goodland, Kansas, and it's really windy, kind of cloudy, and we go inside to eat.
Kentucky Fried Chicken. I remember.
Kentucky Fried Chicken. We're sitting at the table, and Chris is looking out the window, and he says, that looks like a tornado out there. And I look out, and there's this big warehouse, like massive building, and behind it at the top of it is the top of a funnel, and of a tornado funnel. And I look out and I'm like, nuh-uh. And he's like, I was in Oklahoma. I saw tornadoes when I was in AIT in Oklahoma.
I did several. Yeah.
That is a tornado. And I was like, looking around the restaurant, and everybody's just eating.
They were in line. People were in line waiting to order.
I'm just like looking at him like, no, it can't be. Like, people wouldn't just be sitting here. They'd be like losing their minds. And he's like, well, I don't know, but that's a tornado. And so I get up to go get some napkins at the front, and I'm by the register, and I hear the people in the back say, there's a tornado. I don't remember the more imminent one. Warning or watch?
A tornado watch.
Is the more imminent?
Yeah, that means a tornado's been spotted on the ground.
And yeah. So they said, I heard him saying there's a tornado watch. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know.
Because it sounds like it would be the lesser of the two.
It does.
Tornado warning. It was.
Yeah,
we had to learn
sounds
this.
More serious.
When they say tornado warning, it means watch, conditions like, could make a tornado. Yeah.
Right. So I go back to the table and I'm like, well, they just said up there that there's a tornado watch. And we're like, okay, let's just finish eating and go. And I'm just like marveling at like, why is nobody running? No one's getting out. What's going on? So we finish quickly and we go to get in the car, and the wind is now really blowing. The clouds are even darker.
Oh, it was like dark in the middle of the day.
Yeah. And someone next to our car was getting into their car, and I just heard the answer to a question I didn't hear. I didn't hear the question, but the answer the person said was, I don't know, but it's right above us, which made me look up what's right above us. And I look up, and like the top of the funnel, the clouds are in
Armageddon.
A swirl.
Yeah.
At the right above us, where it's the top of the funnel.
It was like boiling clouds that were circling. It almost looked like CGI effects.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're 21 with our 2 babies, and we get in our little Sentra, and I'm like,
Nissan Sentra.
Get on the road.
She's like, go, Chris,
and
go.
Fly. We've got to. And so he's like hauling ass 90 miles an hour down Highway 70.
That's top speed for the Nissan Sentra.
Right.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
It was redlined.
Serious. And you could see now that you're out on the open highway, you can look over the plains because it's
massive.
Kansas, it's flat, and you look over and you can see the funnel, you can see the tornado, and it's basically chasing us.
No, you could see this massive thing just destroying shit. You could see debris in the air. It was fucking nuts, actually.
We're speeding, and I am like, Chris, drive. And he's like, I am. And I'm like freaking out. And the radio is saying, if you're in Goodland, Kansas, tornado is
Take
5
shelter.
minutes out of town. Take shelter. If you're here, do this. If you're here, do that. If you're here, do this. And they said nothing about being in a car on the road. And they're like, and so I'm like, what do we do? And he's like, we just got to drive. And for like an hour, we were chased down by that tornado. We got away from it.
It kept going.
But I'm literally like looking out the window, trying to keep I'm crying, but trying to make sure that Sheree doesn't see me cry because I don't want her to panic. But I'm like, I'm supposed to be the adult here, and I'm shitting my pants.
Then and that was like, we actually lived all the way on the other side of Kansas in northeastern Kansas, and we got there and we never saw another one. I mean, we had intense thunderstorms, so we never had
those
another.
Were great, but
we never had another.
And I remember having the welcome wagon woman, which I don't even know if that exists anymore. When you moved in the Midwest to a new town, they had
ladies showed up with shit.
A welcome wagon.
Yeah.
And she came and she just welcomed me to the town of Manhattan and
the Little Apple. That's what they called Manhattan, Kansas.
And brought me a basket of goodies and coupons for
local
businesses
stuff,
and directories and numbers and just like information and talked to me. She was asking me how I got there or whatever, and it was military, blah, blah, and asked how. Anyways, we got on the subject of the tornadoes, and I was telling her about this terrifying experience, and she's like, wow, I've lived here for 30 years and I've never seen a tornado. I'm like, what is my luck that I've
Not only that, but we moved to Kansas in 1993, which happened to be the year where they had those 200-year flooding. Remember that?
Yeah, the floods of 93.
It would rain 6 inches in an hour. You would go from driving down the road on bare pavement to water rushing over your hood. It was fucking
And we were
crazy.
literally driving. Remember, we got there. We didn't have a place to live. And we drove around for days. The 2 days that we had in desperate mode because there was nothing to rent because of all this rain and flooding. People had to flee their homes.
Yeah.
And
this is Kansas.
Rentals.
There was 3 hills, and the people that lived on the hills, they were fine, but everyone below, everyone's fucked.
Yeah. So we were driving one day and just desperately looking for something to rent, and there's this old house with this broken down kind of for rent sign kind of knocked over. I don't even think it had a number on it, but we knocked on the door of the neighboring house to ask if they knew a contact number for that house. And we contacted that management company and said, is this available? We're desperate for a place. And they were like, oh, it's not. It got flooded. The basement's flooded. We can't rent it out. And we're like, we don't care. We need a place. We need a place. And so they were like, okay. So they rented it to us. And it was 2 inches of water in the basement, which we just didn't use.
And then every time it rained, it went from 2 to 6 to a foot.
Yeah.
I remember standing on a chair in water trying to screw a fuse into this old fuse box and hoping I didn't die. They found Kansas to be a much-needed change in economy for their struggling little family.
Yeah.
So one thing, I was in the Army before 9/11. I know now everyone gets paid $40,000. The military was not like that pre 9/11. We made shit like below poverty level payment, and that was because I had a family and kids.
Yeah,
I got paid more than other people that lived in the barracks or whatever. It was ridiculous. And so living in Monterey, where rich people struggle sometimes, sucked. It was very difficult. But we ended up in Kansas, and I remember we roll in. Gas was under $1.
Yeah, I think that
it was crazy.
That your paycheck was $1,000 a month at the time.
Maybe, yeah. And
our rent was $450.
Yeah,
and our car payment was $325. So we were fucked.
We were seriously fucked. And then we had to feed our kids, and we had to, clothe our kids, and we had to, pay for
our
gas.
Parents bought all their clothes.
That's true. We had parents. Their children.
I can remember
family.
friends sending us boxes of food. My friend Lori.
Oh, yeah.
My friend Lori sent me a box of food.
We were fucking
starving.
charity cases. That's what it was to be in the military back then, you know. And if you re-enlisted, they didn't give you shit. You just kept getting paid what you were paid or whatever. So, you know, things were. I remember going to the grocery store and going to like buy like a whole chicken or something for some reason. And I remember looking at it and it said $1 on the chicken, this whole chicken. And I remember going to the person. I'm like, I think this is probably labeled. They're like, no. I'm like, it's $1 for this chicken? They're like, well, it came from like 2 miles down the road. Yeah. I was like, it was fucking great.
Yeah.
They soon bought a tiny little house in a tiny little Kansas town. They paid a whopping $38,000 for it, and they fucking loved it. They were 23 years old, moving in on Taylor's second birthday in 1994.
It was Taylor's second birthday.
Yep, it was snowing.
I loved that house. I felt so grateful. Like, I was just like, I can't believe it. This house is mine.
I know.
It's so cool. And I just thought it was huge and amazing. Though it was like 1,200 square feet. I was like, this house is amazing. This is mine.
It's this tiny little house built right before the Civil War. It was super old. It came with this like stack. They called it an abstract. It was literally like the historical record of the house. And so any transaction around the house. So we would sit on the floor. I remember sitting on the floor with you just going through these things. Yeah. And it was in this little town. We lived right on this park that was kind of central to the town.
The city park.
Yeah, it was like kind of where everything happened. And this was Kansas, 1993.
There was even a little train track.
There was a little
that
train
went around that the kids
that
could ride on.
A
little old man would
drive kids around on.
Pull it out once in a while. It wasn't open. It wasn't going all the time. But when you would hear the little horn, and Trey would be like, "Can we ride that train?"
Yeah. There's a pond you could fish in and play. And like our kids were at this point. Shreya was 4 and Taylor she was 5 and he was 2.
Yeah.
They could go across the street and play by themselves in this little town. There was kids everywhere.
The street was really small. Yeah. It was a really narrow street from our house to the playset. The playset was right in front of our house. So the two, like 5 and 2, like literally
they could go across the
street. Tell them
to
go across the street and play.
Pretty fucking cool. I remember one time I was home. I think you were with some friends, like a ladies group or whatever you were part of, and I was at home with the kids, and the policeman knocked on the door, and I went to the door. I'm like, hey, and he's like, hey, are your kids out? I'm like, yeah, they're in the park. He's like, well, you better get them and bring them inside. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? He's like, there's a bull loose in town. And I'm like, what? He's like, a bull? Like horns? Bull? Like, he's like, yeah, a bull. I'm like, oh shit. So I like get Shrey and Taylor, bring them inside. I'm looking out the front door. All of a sudden, this fucking bull runs down the street, and a guy on a horse with a rope
after him.
Yeah, I'm like, we grew up in LA. It's like that was happening, So Kansas was a different world for Chris and Marnee for sure. In June of 1995, another addition came along. His name was Hunter, and though he was born and spent his first few weeks in Kansas. Chris also ended his tour of duty in the Army. He did 4 years, got out right after Hunter was born.
Yep.
And now the not so little family needed someplace free to live, which we did. Marnie's dad, stepmom, and brothers had relocated to Tucson, Arizona. Both Chris and Marnee said, fuck that. We're not going there.
Arizona.
Chris's parents had retired to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. They had never even heard of it and never even thought about a place called Idaho. I didn't even really give it much thought. I knew it was in the United States.
No idea. I had no concept of what it
I knew there was a state called Idaho.
Was like.
Yeah, no clue.
Mm-mm.
However, they packed up their cars with their 3 children and all of their shit and a dog and made the long trip.
Because now we'd had 2 cars because we had a hand-me-down car.
We did. My parents gave me a car. Gave us a car. Yes. The long trip halfway across the country to the Idaho Panhandle.
That was a nightmare trip, too.
Fuck.
We had a newborn.
No cell phones, people. We're in separate cars.
Hunter's 2 months old, so I've got Shreya and Hunter. She's 6.
Yeah.
And you've got Taylor and Rudy, the dog.
The dog.
And
Taylor was like 3 or 4.
And Hunter wouldn't stop crying. He just wanted to eat every 10 minutes. And I'd pull over on the side of the road and feed him, and it was hot. It was August. It was hot in the car, and you have to stop and feed him, and then you get going, and Shrey would try to entertain him for as long as he could, and then he'd start crying again. You're like, no. go, and I'd have to like pull up beside you and be like, we gotta get off the next exit because he's screaming. I'd try to like hold him off as long as possible. Oh God.
And I just remember like going up from Kansas into Nebraska, and then we went over to Nebraska. Super boring, by the way. Like all of this whole trip, and then we get into Wyoming. We go up into Montana. We're driving through Montana. And we're like, wait, where the fuck are we gonna? This looks like shit. I remember thinking like, this is ugly.
Yeah, I was worried because where we were at in Kansas, the northeastern corner of Kansas is really beautiful. It's really green and lush.
Tons
There's
of rivers
trees
and stuff. Yeah.
It's really hilly. It's not flat.
We were right by Missouri. We were like an hour from Missouri.
An hour or two, I think. And so I was like, oh crap. We were like, where did we say we were gonna move? What if it's not as pretty as Kansas?
No one told us that 85% of Montana is shit, and then the one little western sliver is nice. And so all of a sudden we start going into this place where we're like, oh, this is pretty nice.
And then you come into Coeur d'Alene on the eastern side and across the bridge,
whoa.
and you it's like the most amazing view to come into Coeur d'Alene. Because if you come in from the west, it's meh. But if you come in from the east into Coeur d'Alene, mind blown, because you come over over the mountain ridge, and you see the lake,
to the lake,
and the forest around surrounding it. It's just an incredible view.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay,
we're good. Good.
This will be good.
Yeah. Yeah. And back then in 1995, Coeur d'Alene was a sleepy little town.
Little.
Like right now in the winter, there was nobody on the road.
It was about 30,000.
You drive in Coeur d'Alene now, you want to slit your throat.
Yeah.
It's terrible. They settled into life in North Idaho, living with Chris's parents. Free. That's what we were looking for. Things turned around for the family as Chris started a tech career, leading to much better paychecks. Not at first, though.
No.
So, like, this story is great because, Marnee being a hairstylist, we roll into town. She gets a job in 5 minutes, right? And I'm trying to find. Now, again, this is pre 9/11. I was not a hero. I was not a skilled labor, like someone that people were scrambling. Oh, you were in the military? Thank you for your service. No one fucking said that. Okay? This was like the 90s. Peace reigned. We were getting. When I got out of the Army, they said, if you sign this paper, we'll waive your National Guard or your reserve duty because they were trying to reduce the force because we didn't need a huge military. Things were going a little better in that regards. And so no one was scrambling to hire me out of the military because I was such a fine example of an American, right?
Yeah.
And so with no college education and nothing but a fucking 4 years in the Army, I was struggling to find a job. Well, Marnee cuts the hair of this woman who said, hey, the company I'm working for is hiring. And so I got this job at the very bottom rung. I mean, the fucking lowest you could possibly, entry-level shit.
You were making 18,000.
I made it, like 18.5 or something like that. Had 3 kids, by the way. We were 25 at this point. I was 25. You were 24. And, but that started a career where I'm kind of a like go-getter kind of person. So I got in there and went like, oh, I could go somewhere with this. And so I actually climbed the ladder and things turned out quite well, right? We didn't make $18,000 for long. So Chris continued to climb.
That was tech in the 90s.
That was tech in the 90s. It was quite awesome. Yeah. Chris continued to climb the corporate ladder. They bought another house. We bought a house in Athol. Remember, we paid like $78,000 for that house, right?
I think it was 72.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was back when we bought a house on a half acre of land up near, like, in Athol, Idaho, north of Coeur d'Alene. And this would have been in 1996.
And I think we sold it for 78 or something because we just barely made enough to pay it off.
What's crazy is we went by it recently. First of all, the whole neighborhood. It was the first paved neighborhood in the whole town. Like, this is a pretty country town. And we went past it recently and drove through the neighborhood. It looks like Breaking Bad, the live show.
Yeah. But the property values are crazy.
No, I looked it up. It's like almost $400,000 for that house that we bought. It looks so bad. But it has a half acre.
It's still the same color that we had it painted.
But it had a half acre lot. They all had half acre lots.
And that was 25 years ago.
We
painted it 25 years ago, and it's still the same color.
It's crazy. It's funny. But we're financial geniuses, too, by the way, just so you know. just as a case in point, during this time, we sold our house in Kansas as well. We bought it for $38,000.
Not yet.
Not yet, but we eventually would sell our house in Kansas later. We bought
we
it for 38,
and we owned it for 7 years.
7 years, and we sold it for 32.
Yes.
We took a $6,000 loss on a $38,000 house. Yes. So real estate moguls. So they spent an 11-month period living in Colorado Springs. We did that, with my job. I ended up taking a huge promotion. We ended up in Colorado Springs. Sucked, by the way. We hated it, which led us to returning in 1998 to Coeur d'Alene. In February of 1999, Chris and Marnee, now both 28, welcomed their 4th little one into their brood with the birth of Mason. As their 30s dawned, Chris and Marnee were living the suburban family life and thriving. Chris had gotten in early at a tech startup and was doing well. The kids were in private school. Things were good. Remember this time?
Yeah.
We were living in this big-ass fucking house, and we had a bunch of money.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shrey and Taylor were in school, and Hunter was home with me. But then, then he went to little kindergarten in his little tiny uniform. He was so tiny in his uniform.
Tiny uniform. I was flying all over the world, trying to get people to give us money, because it turns out 2000 was a terrible time to join a startup. And by 32, Chris found himself unemployed, right? So as the dot-com bubble burst, the company I was a part of, and an important part of, eventually got to the point where we're just shedding everybody, and I wound up eventually also finding my way out. And I remember coming home and going so I don't have a job now. Now, this was a better time to get a job than now. I immediately had tons of job offers.
And they were asking you
for
back.
more money.
And they were asking you back after they let you go, and we turned it down.
Right. So Chris had a choice to make. He could continue his climb in the corporate world, leading to wild success and wealth, or he could heed the call of Jesus. Because what I didn't tell you is that during this time, and that's what the part I wrote. We're going to talk about the rest. We're just gonna riff this one. So in the way Marnee having the origin she did as having a baby as a Christian teen in high school, there was a lot of shame and guilt that was placed on her by judgmental people and the programming that she'd been brought up with, that she put on herself and society period. Absolutely. And her response to that was, so one thing I didn't bring up during this time is that Marnee was sliding deeper and deeper into kind of like an attempt to redeem herself in the eyes of God or what have you. Do you want to talk about that? I want to hear from you.
You want to hear from me?
What it was like for you, like what you were after. Because I think people meet you now and they'd be like, what? I'm like, no, Marnee was a fucking religious radical. And people are like, no. I'm like, no, she was.
Well.
But I mean, Marnee was like wearing dresses and it
was like driven to redeem my identity as the fallen woman.
Right. To prove that you weren't a bad woman.
Yeah. And carried this guilt and shame, and it was so dumb.
It was.
And so it just drove it's it's a really yucky it's a bummer. I see women now in religion and the shame that's put on, and it makes me crazy to see what they go through and know the origins. So like when women are super judgmental of others, each other, I don't know, I just relate to it being in that place where I just was so striving for that approval. So as much as it makes me angry to see, it's crazy. I became the hurtful women that judged me as a little girl in the church because my parents were divorced in the church. Those women, I became that woman in the church later. It's like you become the perpetrator that did it sucks. So I was on this road too.
But also, Marnee and I always continued working with teenagers.
Yeah, because I was driven to,
Yeah.
like, you're trying to save and change and redo, so you keep recreating the scenario of when you had some trauma.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be working with teenage girls to help them not make the choices I made to be in the positions I was, which ended up making me really judgmental and harsh on them from my fear that they would repeat my thing, and I was wanting to redo it through them vicariously, right? Have them make the choices that I didn't make.
Right.
And then also, like, my daughter did the same thing to her.
Yeah. You were trying to use your experience to keep people from doing what you thought was a bad.
It seemed like the right path to be on. It seemed noble and it seemed good. And it was just all based in some really, really terrible programming in my brain that in actuality was destructive and harmed girls and was hurtful and continued that messed up programming. And I've gone back and apologized when appropriate and when I could, and I've had good restoration with some of the girls.
Yeah.
And then I actually did shift gears in the midst of it when we were.
No, we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
So, but Marnee and I, we had actually worked with teenage kids, even when we were in Kansas, all through our 20s. And at this point in our early 30s, we were actually at quite a large church who didn't have anyone doing that. And so we had stepped in and were leading the high school teenage kids at this large mega church, essentially. I mean, there was over 1,000 people there. It's like, it was huge.
Oh yeah, there was like 2,000.
Yeah, and so I get laid off and I come home and we'd been really committed to working in this kind of youth program. We loved it. We had little kids that their teenagers around was great for them, and they loved our kids, and it was just a really, really awesome thing.
And we're a good team together, Christina.
Yeah.
We work together well.
And so I remember going in to talk to the head pastor of this church to say, hey, I got laid off, but I'm still going to help with the high school group and stuff. And
no, I think that we said we feel called to go.
I did. I told him, I'm like, I would definitely consider doing this full time. I know you don't have
the verbiage was, I feel called.
Yes, of
because
course.
That's what you say when you're a Christian.
That's what we said. I feel called by
God to be in full-time ministry.
Right. And he's like, yeah, let me think about it. And like, it was a little bit while, I don't know how long, like a week or something later, he was like, you know what? I do think you are called to do this. And so we're going to bring you on as a pastor at the church, right? I was like, oh, shit.
And I was saying, that's what you say because that was our language. We were just not just putting words on. We were speaking. That was our native tongue.
Yeah, that was. Definitely the lingo. And so next thing you know, I found myself a pastor at this church. And honestly, I'd never read the Bible all the way through. I didn't know that much about it other than the stuff everyone knows.
Well, but by this point, we'd been in that church for a few years.
We had.
And I
had more exposure, but I still.
You had, by that point, you had been listening to the Bible more in sermons, and you had been teaching it to the kids.
Yes. Mostly what I was teaching was the stuff that I was listening. And so I was just, what I'm saying is there was huge sections of the Bible that I didn't fucking know a clue about.
Yeah.
There were stories that people would bring up that I'm like, I didn't know that was in there. And I didn't say this out loud, obviously, but I'm the pastor.
Yeah.
And I just remember panicking like shit. But I kind of do well when I'm in over my head. And so I just threw myself into it. And this was kind of Marnee's dream. Marnee really wanted to be in ministry, but she has a vagina, and
you can't do
the disqualifying thing, it turns out. And so I was kind of her Manchurian candidate, so to speak. I was like her proxy. And so I fucking dove into it. I took seminary classes online. I read through the Bible incessantly over and over to where, I'd read it like 3 or 4 times all the way through. By the time I'd gotten months into the job, because I just felt so inadequate and behind, and people were asking me things and expecting things of me, and I'm like, how do I? And I'm just, trying to like, fool my way through this until I become competent. But eventually we settled into like, we fucking loved it.
Oh, yeah.
We were good at it,
it was
too.
Fun. It was good.
It was so fun. But as we're going along, things start to change. Even before things really started to change, I felt like things started to change. Like we started our attitude after being, I think.
Well, I remember being 4 years in.
That's what I'm saying is like,
and
we had some experience of like the politics and
we were about 4 years in, and I remember us stopping and going, I don't want this to feel like a job.
Right.
I had felt passionate about ministry and God and teaching the kids about it, the high schoolers, and then it was becoming a job, and we were like, this isn't good. So I think,
we did. I remember saying
set
like,
our minds to be ignited,
right,
and to be challenged, and to, okay, well, let's dig into this more. Let's know more. Let's be more Christ-like. Let's get rid of this job stuff. Let's peel away the layers of the religion. Let's peel away the layers of church and get to the origins of this Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember us having conversations where we're like, if it doesn't have to do with the truth or things that are real, we don't want anything to do with it. I remember having that, and I even remember having that conversation with you, and I think it was you that said, no matter where that leads us.
Yeah, because once I point in a direction, if I shift like my aim, I'm going all the way.
Yeah. Marnee's Aries rising.
Which I didn't know back then, but I knew I knew that us really digging in was going to create, because so far I had been just seeking the approval of the leadership.
Right.
And so my whole goal was to get their approval for the first 4 years. And so at this point, 4 years in, I was like, all right, I don't need to be that. That shouldn't be my aim. I don't need it to be my aim. I really should be aiming at Jesus and truth. So I'm going to shift and I knew internally that when I shifted that direction, that was going to cause conflict amongst the other leaders, because I knew that they weren't acting like Jesus. I could see it, feel it, experience it. And like, who was? None of us were, right? But I wanted to improve how I was, right? And so I was ready to challenge myself and the people around me.
Yeah.
And I knew that was going to not go well with the people that were in higher positions than me.
Totally. And I'd spent some time as like the golden boy at this place, like where, like everyone loved me and stuff. And I do remember making that decision going like, this could change things. And it was shortly after that the church was very large and was part of a very large network of churches. And they had these Bible colleges, and our church decided to start one on our church campus. We were a large church with a lot of people, and so they were starting this thing. And I was handed a list of courses I was going to have to teach. And there was all shit I had no clue about, like church history. I didn't know shit about church history, right? I had taught the Bible verse by verse at this point, pretty much all the way through, most of the books more than once. I was well versed in the Bible and that whole thing. But if you ask me like stuff about the history, I didn't know shit, right? And I remember them giving me this stack of books and saying, this is what they use. And I'm flipping through these books, and it's all this super kind of, I could tell that it was very revisionist and kind of like, turns out we're all good, And I knew enough about history to go, things weren't good all the time. Like there was something going on. And I remember that was the time when I started studying for all these classes that were all very academic and kind of outside of the Bible and more looking at the Bible from outside and coming home to you.
Yeah. And I started in my own journey, like we've found later, we were on separate journeys, going in the same direction. We didn't realize that we were, and so you were surprised at the end point, or one of the end points of our paths, that I actually coincided with where you were at, but mine had started at that time too, and it was that shift and like, let's do this more real.
Yeah.
But I go about it a different way. So first I started researching, like trying to look at connect with other Christians doing Christian life differently on the internet.
Right.
And
because that was the time when this was starting to become,
that was a new outlet.
Yeah.
And there was 2 stories that grabbed me. I still remember them, and it's interesting what was going on in my psyche that they grabbed my attention. But one news story was of a young pastor in Texas that had been electrocuted in the baptismal.
Oh yeah, I remember that. He grabbed the mic. He grabbed the microphone and his fucking killed him.
Wife and family and all the congregation watched him fucking die in the baptismal.
Yep.
I was traumatized because I was just like so empathically feeling for that wife and kids experienced that, and they were like a similar role to what our family was. So probably a similar age. So I was just like, oh my God, that's traumatic.
Yeah.
So I kept checking in on the blog of that church, and it was David Crowder's.
Yeah.
It was David Crowder.
It was in Waco, Texas.
Waco.
By Baylor University.
Yeah.
Attached to
and so it was very progressive minded. And so it sent me on.
It was a hipster church before it was cool.
Before it was cool. Hipster, yeah. Totally.
Ultimate hipsters.
Totally. And just like reading their blog, going to other churches like them, reading, and it was just like, whoa, my mind was expanding in different ways to be Christian. And then also another story was of a homeschool girl on the East Coast who had killed her parents.
Yeah, with her boyfriend, who was also a homeschool kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she was on the run. And see, at the time, I homeschooled my kids. So basically, like these 2 stories that were resonant with my role in the world, and they were going badly.
Right.
And it just shook me. I was ready to be like, question things. And so I was like, I was told that homeschooling was going to make your kids the best kids and make them superior, and it was the right path. And I was really, in my parenting, looking for all the things that were going to make my kids healthy and happy and at the formula. And so I was striving hard and pouring my everything into making sure I did those things. And so having this homeschool kid kill her parents, I was like, holy shit, homeschool does not prevent.
It's not the answer.
Yeah. And I was already seeing that because we worked with teenagers. So I saw in our group, we had teenagers that were homeschooled. We had teenagers that were private school and public school. And from all of those places, we had great kids. We had troubled kids. We had antisocial kids from all of the different types of school. There's no formula. And I was seeing that as in the kids that I was working with for years and years.
Right.
But I was like still in denial. So it took that one little like click of that murderous girl to like really shake me and go, fuck, we need to fucking break out of this fucking bullshit that we are being like
you're all, thanks
fed.
for killing your parents, girl. That really like woke me up.
Yeah.
No, totally. And so and in the midst, while Marnee's going through this kind of like crisis of faith to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Not really.
Not
it's not
totally
shaking your faith, but it's
shaking
changing
how
it drastically.
I thought about it and how I thought I was supposed to live it.
We were in a very conservative, evangelical, right wing. It was an evangelical church, like you think.
Mm-hmm.
And so these kinds of questions were big, even though to a lot of people they'd be like, that's not that big. But it was huge in this context as pastors. But at this point now, our livelihood is tied to this.
Mm-hmm.
So questioning matters of faith it's dangerous, not just from a spiritual standpoint, from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
And so I'm coming home, though, and going, Marnee, because I had about a year to get ready for these classes. And so I'm reading all these books and I'm taking all these like online courses and like trying to figure all this out and get it straight. And I'm coming home going like, okay, this is what they told us to believe. And this is how it happened in reality.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. How can we believe this? And so we started like carving stuff off of our faith and started out on the periphery, right? It started out on stuff that we didn't care about.
Yeah.
Stuff that wasn't like foundational or central to our faith. We were going like, Jesus isn't real right off the bat, right? That wasn't how where we started. Mm-hmm. It was very innocuous stuff that was mostly debates within the church.
Yeah.
But, like one of the topics we confronted was, what do we do about the LGBTQ question? Like, what do we do about gay kids? Or what if one of our kids is gay? Remember, we were having these kinds of like
I don't actually remember having that as part of our discussions. I was seeking that out in my own research because I was thinking like, gosh, if I have 4 kids, any one of them could be gay. How would I deal with it?
See, I remember having this discussion with you, so I don't know why you said we didn't have this, but I remember you telling me, we have this many sons.
Yeah.
One of them could be gay.
I was researching, I was reading, I was following, I was like just trying to get my hands on stuff that I hadn't like looked at before. I just kind of like shut out and like, I don't know what to do with that, so I was going to have my preconceived ideas and like my little short answers, the end, but I was now like, I need more information to make decisions about what I think about these things.
Yeah, and it was good that we did that because it turns out Mason, our youngest son, is gay, and he's known nothing but support and excitement and us being pumped about who he is.
I'm so glad.
And so I'm glad we tackled that before that went down.
Yeah.
He was just little.
Yeah, he was little. When we were going through this.
Yeah, and so that wasn't really a factor, but then it turned out I'm so glad that we did that because he really has known nothing but this really great environment for him to be himself in, which is fucking awesome. But anyway, we're at this church, and so now we're secretly questioning these things. This is like me and Marnee alone at home talking about this shit, not stuff that's coming, but it is changing the way that we're doing things. Like I felt we became better at ministering, if you want to use that word. Loving the people. We loved doing this job. Fun. This was not a fucking
I really feel like
burden to us.
Yeah, because I really feel like we started really diving into feeling passionate about what we were looking at because we were now we were like, you know what? Jesus is everywhere in the Bible. And so if anything is confusing in the Bible, align it with Jesus, and that's how you interpret it, to interpret it correctly. Yeah. So, because there was some verse that you would say, Jesus said, the law and the prophets are about me, or something like that.
Well, he was like, if someone asked him, show us the Father, and then we'll be satisfied. And he said, well, I'm telling you that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father.
Okay, so you would use verses all the time that were like, I am the description of what those things are talking about.
Because they'd be like, what would God think about this? I'm like, well,
what did Jesus do?
Said,
that was always the answer.
We're the same guy. What does Jesus say? Like, well, he doesn't say anything. I'm like, well, it sounds like maybe it's not a big deal and you should not worry about it then.
I shifted from being like very dictatorial in the way that I taught the girls to more conversational and would just kind of facilitate conversation with them. And let them feel more open to talk, and I was definitely just it shifted the way that I instead of speaking in this is it, these are the answers tone, it was more like, what do you think about this? Especially with my young adult girls, we would have just like really amazing conversations. Also loved when we would have the team over that we led, the leadership team, all the people that helped us with the youth. And we would have like 30 people at our house regularly and supporting all of them, and just
it's fucking awesome.
It was super cool.
It was cool. However, and you know, I mean, it kind of started this slide where we began to, our faith refined down to smaller and smaller things, to where we were kind of hold on to a core of something and had really gotten rid of the dogma around a whole lot that the Christianity had become about. And, you know, I had already been at odds with the pastor a little bit. I was much younger than him. I was 20 years younger than him. There was only 3 of us in this huge church. One of them didn't teach, and so it was just me and this senior pastor. And I had taught early on in his place, and it kind of presented this threat to him. So there was always this uneasiness. But as we began to change, tensions kind of grew, right? Mm-hmm. And it was kind of because we got so much better. People were drawn to us. Like, I would preach to this auditorium of 700 people, and they would walk out super light and happy, and then he would preach and they'd be super heavy and ashamed of themselves. And it just created this tension to where, some people were saying you should be the, and
I think that the way that you taught, it made you think of things that they had read for years in a different light. Because we were looking at it in a different light.
That's why.
So we were like, look what we just found. Like, look what this meaning is. What if you applied Jesus to this, and look at this, and you would just like explain this thing that you probably sat through listening to sermons for all their lives, and just shine a different perspective on it. And people were like, wow, I never thought of that. And so it was very inspiring and mind opening, and so people were drawn to that.
Yeah, it was cool. But also, we got to a point where we're like, it was so stressful. It was so stressful that Marnee, my little religious zealot of a wife, we would be walking. We lived very close to the church that we worked at, and we were walking to church one night, and I remember you went off. And I'm the pastor at this church, and here's my pastor's wife, and we're walking down the sidewalk, and you're looking at me and you're like, I can't fucking take this anymore. This is bullshit. We need to fucking get out of here. And you're just letting F words fly. And I remember thinking like, okay, this is real. Like, she's serious about this. And so that began this very intense. So I started looking for work at another church. Like, maybe we can go to another state.
Because we kind of skipped out on the fact that with the trouble came me getting a lot of passive aggressive attack.
Yeah.
So it was super stressful on me.
Women are definitely dangerous in the church, and powerful women are especially dangerous. And the pastor of this church definitely felt that. There was quite a few times I was called into his office to tell my wife to be quiet. Of course, he never called Marnee into his office because he was scared of her, and he should have been. But yeah, there was.
It's ridiculous. If you can't just have a conversation with someone,
I know, but
have a discussion, you're a fucking wuss.
He was a wounded little boy that was just trying to whatever. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that. But we did start looking elsewhere. Like we gotta skedaddle, right? We gotta get out of here. And I remember going to talk to him and saying like, hey, just so you know, I've tried to come to you to sort this out. I have no intention of making any kind of division here or whatever. I'm just here to serve people and to like serve you and like fucking do this. But it's not working out. You don't seem to want to do that. And so we're looking elsewhere. And his first comment was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. You should look elsewhere.
Like, oh, good.
You
Get
fucking
the fuck
asshole.
out.
He was such a fucking prick. In the pulpit, he was such this tough guy, just tried to convince you that he was some fucking warrior for Christ, but he was such a pussy.
Passive aggressive.
Oh my God, he was
could not confront
He was
anything.
A wounded little child. running this fucking multi-million-dollar church.
He would mock people with about their inner puppy, probably just projecting his own wounded self.
Well, I mean, that's what we do
onto everybody else, and like shaming them for having it because he would self-hating his own woundedness.
Yeah. So, but we looked around, and there was a couple places that were interested. And so I told him that, hey, I'm looking elsewhere, and he's like, well, I'll tell you what. This was like September of 2009, and he goes, well, yeah, let's just take it to the end of the year, and we'll see. We'll talk then, and we'll reevaluate and see what's up.
About it,
yeah, we'll just keep praying about it, of course. See what God has to say, right? Yeah. Let's let God make this decision, even though I already want you to fucking go, and there is no God. I'm just gonna do what I want. And so, like, fucking the next day, this asshole calls me in and goes, you know what? If it was me, and I already had my heart set on leaving, I wouldn't want to stick around. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I'm not you. But anyway. He goes, so I think you should just leave now. And so I called Marnee.
He's like, no, this was mid-September. He said, why don't you just make the end of September be?
Oh, that's right. The end of September.
And that's 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I told Marnee, I'm like, well, so never mind about the whole end of the year thing. 2 weeks. And so 2 weeks later, and he said,
we'll pay you to the end of the year.
Yeah, no, he did. I mean, I'm not going to say that. But I mean, like, we left the life that we had.
And we had to tell the kids because we had to tell the youth and everybody at the church that God had called us someplace else, right? Because we didn't want to say this prick that's leading this church is a narcissistic, passive-aggressive
chased us
asshole.
Off. Anyway.
We can say anything with a smile, say, God's leading us away. Yeah. We're excited about it. Support us.
But so we find ourselves out, and eventually I end up back in the startup company that I was at before I went into the ministry. Had been bought by a larger company. The little scrap of it that was left, and they kind of built that division back up. And so I was able to slip back in eventually.
Yeah, 9 months later, after we had to sell our house at a loss. And
I went from making like 6 figures to 30 grand, and then back to 6 figures, which was nice.
Yeah, that was
and we moved to downtown Spokane because we were like, we got to get the fuck out of Post Falls. Yeah. When you're at a church with 2,000 people in it.
In a town of 14.
Post Falls is like
small.
Right. And all of a sudden we were, persona non grata for sure. Everyone bailed on us except just a couple, really just one person who stayed the whole time, and she's amazing.
Well, and I have to take ownership that I didn't really want Christians around me because I wanted the freedom to explore my beliefs and question them. And so I definitely didn't want the kids following me and staying close to me, the teens and the young adults, because I didn't know where my faith was going, and I didn't want to lead someone astray if I was wrong.
Yeah, because we were still Christians at this point. We still called ourselves Christians.
So I pushed them away so that I could feel free to question. And then when we finally did stop believing, I think it was probably within 9 months of
it was about that
leaving, and then it was like our faith was completely gone after research and finishing that exploration that
we
you
just
had.
Kept pulling on the threads that we were pulling on, and
and it just like made sense. Like, oh, there is no God. That's why this is all bullshit.
That's why it's going this way.
It's so fucked up. And I needed then to like reprogram my brain.
Yeah.
And because it had been so programmed from birth, and it was so affected that I didn't want Christians around me on the regular reinforcing my wrong programming.
Right.
I wanted clear programming, deprogramming that Christian mindset. And so I was super aggressive against it in a lot of my conversation. Made it really uncomfortable for any of our old Christian friends, and that was fine. I think it was subconsciously my need to push them away so that I didn't have Christian programming speaking into my life. I didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, and by the time we came to this point where we're like, okay, we don't believe anymore. Like, we're nothing.
Yeah.
That kicked off a pretty brutal 3 years. Just so you know.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like we woke up one day and said we don't believe in God anymore, and we just skipped off into our new life. It was
deprogramming is brutal, and it's a years-long thing. Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. And they say, like, losing God is like losing a parent.
Yeah.
And so we were adrift.
Yeah. You literally have to parent yourself up to an actual real adult, because you're not a real adult until you're without God.
Yeah.
With God, you always have the Father there. You always have this in your mind. You're the child, always. And I didn't become a full-fledged real adult until there was no God in my mind, and I'm the adult. I'm the parent. I'm my parent. I'm my God. I am the leader in my mind. And it's fucking good.
And we were 40 at this time.
Yeah.
We were 40 years old.
I was 40 before I finally became a real...
We had to figure our shit out.
Yeah.
And it was good. I mean, as bad as it was bad. But also it was good because we were presented with horizons we had never been free to pursue, or we never allowed ourselves to pursue. And I remember that formed like a lot of what we would move on from once we got through that, because eventually that time period ended and we were fantastic. And we were like, fuck, we're so glad we did this.
Yeah.
We really did, though, like we really set about trying to understand what had just happened to us.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Okay, how did we spend 40 years of our life? How did we have 4 children and bring them up? How did this happen if now we're standing here going, well, we don't believe this? Mm-hmm. And so we instantly got into different things. Marnee and I, our personalities are very different. Our minds work differently. But through that, again, we kind of influenced each other and brought different material.
Yeah.
And that's really why we do this podcast.
Yeah.
Is out of the product of that. And I love doing this podcast because it's me getting to do stuff with you again.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing about being a pastor that was so fucking awesome, was even though Marnee wasn't allowed to technically be a pastor, dude, when I got hired, Marnee and I are sitting there in front of this guy, and he said, You're called.
Pointed at Chris and said,
then he points at Marnee and says,
called.
You're not.
You're not.
That's
and
dead
I was
serious.
so fucking programmed in that fucking bullshit. I was happy to be like, oh, I know.
I was like offended.
I know. I don't want
and Marnee
to be.
was like, yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
and I'm
like,
like,
down with that.
Okay.
Because I am completely programmed in misogynistic patriarchy. Do me hard.
What
Fuck
people
me
didn't
over.
realize is they're like, they thought I was so wonderful and stuff. I'm like, if I had leashed that chick on you guys would be going crazy.
When conservatives tell me like, oh, they have women there, women here, women believing, women in this position in the right wing, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Their internalized patriarchy, their internalized misogyny. Yeah, I know. I'm not surprised they're there. We take on our programming and we place ourselves there, and we place every other woman there and condemn them for not being there.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we still, though, like, we were still determined to be a team. And I remember going, like, I don't fucking care. We're doing this together.
Because you and I, so, they had these expectations out there, but you and I have always operated.
We were always like a unit.
As a team.
Yeah. And I remember leaving and feeling like a sense of loss from that.
Oh, yeah.
And we kind of did go off in different directions, like, as far as our exploration after that. And so there was that kind of loss of this common kind of mission. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had our marriage and our relationship and stuff, but now it's so fun to sit down and do this with you.
Yeah.
Because then we leave the church, and then we leave Christianity, and then we go through this period of time, and that period of time really shaped us to. I mean, we exited those 3 years a different people with different views of the world that we had never had before, right? It was fucking new life. It was crazy.
It was really intense the first few years, but
43.
I wasn't done. I wasn't transformed in 3 years. I seriously, been,
no.
I think like 2017 was really a really click shift. I'm a different person. 2017, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah. It's a crazy story.
Yeah.
And we've lost a lot. We've lost family. Mm-hmm. We've lost tons of people that once loved us.
They probably love us from a distance. They just don't.
They probably do, but we're also I mean, obviously, we got real weird with it. Not the first thing, but like eventually, I got to this point where I'm just like, "Fuck you, God," and I was like, I'm ordering a Satanic Bible right now. and I get it on Amazon. $4.99 with free shipping, by the way. So in case you're wondering if it's like some $1,000 book that some fucking wizard sends you, it's not. It's printed on the shittiest newsprint you've ever seen. You can read it in a matter of about 45 minutes. It's fucking poorly written. I mean, I expected to open up this box and have this like brimstone come out and then like printed on baby skin, or something, evil. And I remember getting into that and just real rebellious and stuff, and like just finding all this crazy shit, and like then going through that and going like, and then it's just been such an interesting thing to start a relationship with you in a certain place and then find ourselves 30 years later.
Yeah.
50-year-old people that we couldn't even imagine being when we were 20 years old standing on that altar.
Yeah. And we've like skimmed. This was a skim.
There's so much bullshit happened.
Stop along the way.
Like I didn't even touch actually on the real thing.
Yeah.
But that's been our story. And that's why we do this podcast, is because through all of this, we've come to confront our own belief.
Yeah.
And we search out the origins of our own belief and how then they changed and were transmitted down to us, and like, why was that? And what impact does that have? Is that good or bad? And confronting all of that, and then leaving the church and diving into all these weird subjects. I mean, we got into super weird spirituality, and I got way into like evolutionary psychology and like personality science and all of these things, all in an effort to try and figure out what just happened to us.
Yeah.
What did we just go through? Because now I feel like this rational human standing here looking back at the first 40 years of my life going, what was that? And so I love telling these stories on Blasphemy because to me it's like, I feel it. I understand it.
Yeah.
Like when we're looking at these people, we're like, they believe this is so fucking stupid.
Yeah, that's why I'm always arguing with you about belief. I know,
but I say that because I'm not saying that to make fun of them. I'm saying it because I feel that way also about some of the things I did, but I also can place myself in there and understand that there was a lot of personal stuff.
Right. Well, there's a lot of psychological stuff going on to why we believe things and the paths that we choose to go on. So it's like, that's exactly what you're saying, is the reason that this is so interesting to us is because we're so curious about what makes people believe things and go on the paths that they go and commit their lives to things that are, we on the outside can go, that's crazy. Like a lot of people, like there's a lot of atheists that will look at like Christians and be like, what? But like we were in it and you don't see it. And so so we're curious about ourselves. Like it seems so clear now on the outside that it's not real. How did I so believe that?
Yeah.
And then look at all these other beliefs that people are like, no, this is it. Without a doubt. You can, yours was wrong. I get it. Yours was wrong, but mine's not.
But
mine's real.
It out.
Yeah, this is the truth.
It turns out of all the people living, I stumbled upon the truth of the universe in 2021. Shut up. So I wanted to tell a story mostly for us because it's our 30th anniversary, 30 years.
Yes.
So fucking crazy, baby. I love the shit out of you. For 30 years, we've been exploring new territory. And I love this podcast because I love doing that with you.
I do too.
And then I love being able to laugh with you about these things and then relate back to like, remember when we were crazy Christians doing this shit? Oh my God.
But this does remind me of those talks we used to have when we were opening and exploring things together, and you would study and you would come home and talk to me about it, and we would just have conversations. We would have go on walks and talk about these things.
We lived downtown Spokane. We every
day.
But I
mean, I'm talking like the conversations when we were still.
Oh
in the
yeah,
church.
when I was still a pastor.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I would come home and I'd say, "Hey, I have some stuff to tell you," and you're like, "Let's go for a walk," and we go for a walk.
No one else could we talk to about this stuff, and you and I would just connect, and we would like even go out of the house because we want to talk about things in front of the kids, maybe.
True.
Or and so
like we had close knit group of friends, and we could not share. We did not tell them about any of these things that we were talking about.
Some things, but
well, and only in very innocuous ways that were very leading and kind of like, see, it's but they didn't really understand the depths of like the questioning that we were under until later. And then they all bailed on us. So fuck you. But anyway, I mean, I understand why you left us. I don't want to be mean. Not fuck you. I get it. Okay. There's a whole bunch of people that are like, Chris and Marnee never believed, obviously. I get why you need to do that. That's a protective measure for your own faith. Trust me, we fucking believed. You don't go from making $130,000 a year to $30,000 because God isn't real and I don't really believe. I remember being at my desk, and this was in the midst of like a lot of this questioning, but it was early on, and it was very, again, my own psyche was protecting me. I did not dive into the core issues and challenge those right away because that was scary. But I do remember sitting at my desk in my office, and my door's closed, and I'm sitting there, and I think I just like listened to something, or some other fucking pastor or something, talking about how you have to like love God more than anything, and including your wife. And I remember sitting at my desk, and I began to cry, and I'm like, I absolutely 100% know that I love Marnee more than God. I know that. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to fucking fake it. I know that there is no way I'm going to love this intangible, super vague, subjective force more than this woman that I have spent and been back to back in so many battles with. How could I possibly love something fake more than this real thing? And it was heartbreaking to me. Like, I believed, and I thought that was possibly going to send me to hell. Like,
I was so terrified of losing you, like thinking of you dying, because I'm always worst case scenario. I'm always planning to
if you're 5 minutes late, Marnie's calling the fucking hospital or searching the roadside for your corpse.
So I'm always like worst case scenario. So you would travel. And then when the kids were little, I was like, oh my God, I cannot. I will lose my mind. And I could bring myself to tears just thinking about you dying when when I was younger. And the only way that I could comfort myself was to be like, okay, God's with me. God will have me, and I'll be okay. Like through that was the only way that I could comfort myself. But I would was terrified at the thought of being without you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah. I fucking love the shit out of you. I can't even tell you. But thanks for indulging us. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode about a brand new topic. It won't be this, I promise. But this was, a personal thing. We just wanted to tell you our story to let you know where we come from. So as we tell these and you hear us say things, mostly in jest and just joking and fucking around, not serious. I mean, sometimes I'm serious, but I mean, usually I'm just being whatever, charming. But yeah, this podcast really is, and we just want to let you know how much of a product it is of like the experience Marnee and I have had. Yeah. It wasn't just an idea I had one day. Yeah. It was something that's been born out of our life together. So we just
hang out in our evenings and do this, and it's fun for us.
It's fun for us to sit.
It's like an evening at home.
Marnie's experience is me coming to her going like, babe, you got to hear this. I got to tell you something. And she's just like, oh, okay, whatever. And so now when I'm recording, she has to sit there and listen to me and then provide her brilliant insight. So anyway, we love everyone out there. Thanks for listening. And again, next week we'll come back. If you want to find us, you can find us at blasphemypodcast.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review us there. You can find us on Stitcher, wherever you find your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. So until next time.